So it's myself and Sizwe Dube in studio, and I decided to do an election special on the Penuel show. I think at some point last year in 2023, I think I had 1, 2, maybe 3 political guests, and myself and the team had to sit and think about if we actually want to do political conversations. Because when we created the Penuel show, the whole idea was to have really, really dope conversations with really interesting people, regardless of business, politics. It could be a celebrity, someone in music, someone in film, a random person you don't know, civil society, whatever you want to call it. And I think it's been quite a great journey. But South Africa has got its national elections on the 29th of May, 2024. And we decided that, you know what, in the spirit of using platforms effectively to influence society in some way, we will have political guests, and we've had a lot. And people have complained, some of our audience have complained, saying that it's too much political content. And I kind of hope in election season this is going to be the last one. But it's a special because, number one, it's me, so there's no guest. I'm so sorry. But number two, because I'm hoping it will be educational, somewhat informal, but educational for the purposes of you guys learning. So a bit of history, of course. South Africa became a British Union back in 1910. So we were under British rule. We speak about, is it 1862? 1862, if I'm not mistaken, when Abu Jan van Riebeeck came to South Africa.
1652.
Thank you. Hey, thanks, Sizwe. That's why Sizwe's here. 1652, when Jan van Riebeeck and them came here. And before that, we had some Portuguese guys and other guys that came through on their way to Asia. Abu Vasco da Gama, Bartholomew Diaz, etc. But 1910 is when we became a British Union, and the National Party would come into government in 1948 with the apartheid policy, taking us all the way to 1994, of which some of the conversations to end apartheid started in 1990 with the release of political prisoners and the unbanning of certain political structures. So that's part of our history. British rule for a while, the National Party and Afrikaners took over for a while, and we had apartheid, which was racial segregation. We had Bantustans, the TB-VC, if I'm not mistaken, Transkei, Bophuthatswana, Venda, Ciskei, if I'm not mistaken. Some of the homelands as well, places like KwaZulu, etc., that existed. We're in 2024 now, and you relook at that history and you relook at the democratic journey that we've been on for 30 years. And the African National Congress, the ANC, running this country, ruling this country as a majority party for 30 years. What's really, really special and unique about this year's elections is the fact that we might for the first time have a coalition government where whoever gets the most amount of votes is not getting 50%. A lot of people are hoping that happens. There are many people who think that it won't happen, and we'll see what happens from there. During apartheid, of course, there were a lot of liberation movements, the ANC being one of them. There was the PAC, I believe there was the ZAPO. There were their military wings, APLA, Konto Wesizwe, etc. And all of them led to this democracy that we have today. It is democracy in action in the sense that it's constantly changing. It is democracy in action in the fact that more and more people are becoming politically conscious. And new people are actually getting into the game, which is very, very unique. There have been breakaways from the ANC. We had the UDM, General Bantu Olomisa, Rolf Meyer. We've had COPE, Congress of the People. We've had the Economic Freedom Fighters, the EFF. As of recently, we've had Umkhonto Wesizwe. These have been some of the breakaways in this democracy that we have. The struggle class, out of respect, is dying out. Umkhulu Tata Nelson Mandela has passed away. Some of our leaders, Steve Tshwete, some of the people back there, Walter Sisulu, Oliver Reginald Tambo, they've passed on. Many, many more are going to come, unfortunately. It's the circle of life. And you may find in the next 10 to 20 years, most of the people that were in the struggle, fighting for the political liberation of this country, will no longer be here. The kids that we call born frees, that were born in 1994, are 30 years old this year. 30 years old. And in 5 years, according to definition, they will no longer be youth anymore. So we are, in effect, in a new generation. We are, in effect, fighting for different things today. And that's why these elections are so special and so unique. Sorry, I wrote notes. You guys will excuse me. There are a couple of new interesting players. We saw some of them in the local elections in 2021, and I'll speak about those at some point. There are new players, as I mentioned, Khwezi under Jacob Zuma, that are coming in now to come and contest these elections. And some people are excited, some people are nervous, some people are kind of feeling like nothing's going to change. With the democracy in action I was speaking about, even with the local elections, for the first time, many places got under coalition government. We saw Tshwane, we've seen Johannesburg, we've seen Ekurhuleni, which is the East Rand. We've seen places like Nelson Mandela Bay where the ANC has not been able to get a 50% majority vote, and they've had to work with other political parties. In some places, it works a little bit. In many places, there's a lot of political fighting. In Joburg alone, we've had a couple of mayors within the last couple of years from different political parties. And some people are nervous that if we were to have a coalition at national government, we're going to see a lot of the same. Who knows, having 5 different presidents within 2 years won't be something very scary. Vote of no confidence. Someone is fighting over something. There's an issue of a certain policy. Vote of no confidence. They remove a president, they put in a new one. And we take it from there. Time will tell. What are the major issues that we have to speak about leading into these elections? These are in no particular order. Number 1, electricity and load shedding. This has been a big equalizer in this country. You know, in the past, we'd speak about access to electricity, access to flushable toilets, sanitation, access to schools and clinics, tarred roads, etc. Load shedding came through, and it didn't matter if you were rich, poor, middle class, wealthy. When Eskom was struggling, you were out. And the only way you could get some type of power, of course, is if you had some money and you could get solar, gas, or whatever type of alternative energy. Electricity and load shedding is a big one because it affects our economy as well. A lot of industries, a lot of businesses cannot survive without electricity. They affect healthcare, people that rely on electricity to power their energy, oxygen supply, etc. So that has been a big one, and we haven't had load shedding in almost 2 months, which has been really big, and many people are feeling like it's a part of campaigning for the ANC to make people forget the issues that we've had, because we've had some of the worst load shedding in the last 2-3 years under the leadership of the CEO, Andre de Ruyter. Even though load shedding is over 16 years old today, from back in the days when President Thabo Mbeki was president of South Africa. The quality of roads is another issue. We speak about potholes. Many people have had their cars and their tires messed up. Many accidents have been caused by the poor quality of our roads and the fact that tenderpreneurs come through and do a not so great job. And we end up having to deal with bad roads and certain infrastructure. Our education and schooling becomes another major issue, where we feel like schooling is not speaking to the needs of the economy. It's not speaking to the skills that's needed. A lot of FET and other skills colleges have been closed. Kids are not being able to read for meaning. Kids are leaving matric and not really skilled. Some kids have diplomas, they have degrees, but they're unemployed. Last I checked, we have a 40% graduate unemployment rate. Healthcare. Just recently, the President Cyril Ramaphosa went and signed in the National Health Insurance Bill. Caused a lot of controversy. People were like, we're 2 weeks away from elections. This looks very convenient. This looks like another form of campaigning. Many people are stressed about the NHI bill. What will it mean? Do we cancel medical aid? Etc., etc. And I've made some content speaking around that. Sat with doctors, speaking about those issues. The quality of our healthcare for 84% of our population is in a poor shape. Medicine that runs out, understaffed spaces, places where even within a 15-kilometer radius, people cannot access public healthcare. A lot of people, 16% of the population, have to rely on private healthcare, medical aid, private clinics, private hospitals, and how we can fix some of those issues, because healthcare is literally a matter of life and death. You've got the state of our economy and the lack of transformation, and this speaks to jobs, where currently we've got, if you include people that are not looking for work anymore because they've given up, if you include the entire working age population from age 16 all the way to 65, we've got about 60% of eligible workers in this country not working. Only 40% are working, which is close to 17 million people. And of these 16.7, about 17 million people that are working, the amount of money they are earning is not great. Depending on which report you look at, looking at Stats SA, looking at SARS, which is our revenue services, our tax collectors, you're looking at an average salary of anything between 3,500 to maybe 5,000 rand for the average worker at a median. Some people will tell you that the average salary is 10,000. Depending on the formal sectors, they might tell you that it's 20,000. There is high income inequality in this country, some of the highest income inequality in the world. So even the close to 17 million people that do have jobs, they're not earning well, and the standard of living is very high. A lot of what we call the middle class today are living on debt. Over 65% of those people have to rely on a personal loan, on payday loans, etc. The economy from British rule to apartheid rule, even now in the new democracy, has not been transformed. We saw black economic empowerment, which then became broad-based black economic empowerment, which came with pillars: socioeconomic development, preferential procurement, what we used to call affirmative action, employment equity today, etc., etc. It has only really benefited a handful. This is the reality. And for some people that have tracked the money and followed the money, a lot of these deals have made white people wealthier than before. So in effect, it's failed, except for a handful of people, including the president, maybe some of his family members and associates who have become wealthy. All the people that have BEE partners tend to go to the same pool of people. Our economy has not been transformed. And our economy is not doing well. Businesses keep collapsing, keep closing. They blame COVID now, but we've been seeing the hemorrhaging of businesses since 1994. Businesses delisting from South Africa, companies constantly retrenching, and the inability linked to schooling to upskill our population so that it can speak to these issues, so that we have kids that are leaving matric, kids that are leaving tertiary institutions that can actually start their own businesses and access funding and become players. We haven't been able to resolve the land question. From 1990, 1994, Maibuye, we haven't been able to solve the land question. The government and the Department of Land Affairs will speak about restitution and redistribution. They'll speak about how many millions of hectares they've moved, probably about 2 million. They'll speak about people that they've paid out. But fundamentally, we have not resolved the land issue. And it's still one of the campaigning things, one of the campaigning points that parties like the EFF, the PAC and others still use, the ATM as well. People need to understand what's going on with the land. We need to have a new land audit. We need to have a sit down and really, really speak about what are we doing with the land. Is there land that is not being used? Who should use it? Who should land belong to? Everyone who lives in it, in this country, everyone who's working the land, everyone who is black, everyone who is skilled. That's still something that needs to be resolved, and we need to conclude on it as soon as possible. Number 7 is the destruction of state-owned enterprises. Number 1. And number 2, the privatization of state-owned enterprises. Minister Pravin Gordhan has managed to sell South African Airways, which had been constantly bailed out, billions and billions of rands, for 51 rand. Very scandalous deal, which to this day we're still not fully sure about. Eskom, as a state-owned enterprise, has been split in 3. And now we're bringing in independent power producers because of government's failure to run this as a monopoly, a regulated monopoly to supply power. Transnet, which is our railway system, has been destroyed. And currently government is looking for a private partnership to assist there. The SABC is constantly bailed out. Apparently it's overstaffed. And there are so many more state-owned enterprises that are struggling. And that becomes an issue in itself that needs to be looked at. Our political structures need to be changed. That's a conversation that's constantly coming up when I sit with politicians. Part of it being the empowerment of local municipalities and the potential removal of provincial structures. Crime and safety. Minister Bheki Cele, who used to be stomach in, chest out, is constantly reporting on the worsening crime in this country. We have got serious crime issues in this country, and some of our favorite celebrities have been getting gunned down, aka Tibbs, DJ somebody. And we'll call this crime and safety, some will call it political assassinations. Babita, who was a whistleblower in the Department of Health. People are being murdered. Crime in the Cape Flats is still not being resolved. Gangsterism. People are unsafe. More and more people are looking to move into gated communities when they can afford it. More and more private security companies are popping up. People are scared for their children, for their women, for themselves. And we don't even trust our legal system anymore. It seems biased, especially towards the rich and the politically connected. And along with crime and safety is immigration, huge one. The PA under Gaten McKenzie has raised it. Their hashtag is Abahambe, specifically speaking to illegal foreigners. Herman Mashaba, who was the mayor of Joburg under the DA at the time, was the first to raise this issue at the time. And also under Action SA that he leads today, that's also a very big point. We do not have border fences in certain places. Around Lesotho, certain places going into Limpopo. Our border gates, rampant with corruption. Our Home Affairs officials are selling ID cards, ID books to illegal foreigners. We have got so many undocumented people here. Part of them being South Africans, of course, but a big chunk of them being foreigners that shouldn't be here. What's that conversation? How do we resolve it? Because this speaks to national security. It speaks to our sovereignty as a nation. And these are just some of the major issues going into elections and speak about political structures. We need to speak about these things. And even part of the political structures is the National Assembly and Parliament that we have. And are we comfortable with the 400 seats? Are we comfortable with the provincial legislatures? Etc., etc. Going into the political structures. The current structures we have, for people that may not know, because we're going to be voting 3 ballot papers, and I'll speak about them afterwards. But we've got a National Assembly. That's politics at the highest level. 400 seats. 400 seats that parties compete for. And I'll speak about them when I speak about the last national elections and then my predictions for these upcoming elections. In these 400 seats, we also have 30 ministers who form part of the cabinet along with the president and the deputy president. We've got 30 ministers in this country, and then we've also got 30 deputy ministers, of which many people feel like they need to be scrapped. And even after these ministers and after these deputy ministers, people that are getting paid, we also have DGs, director generals, who are in effect the CEOs of certain departments. That is the structure of National Assembly. When we speak about parliament, point of order, honorable member, all these things you've seen. That's the National Assembly, and that's effectively what we're going to vote for. The 400 people that sit and get to decide what laws we should implement, what laws we should change, and what laws we should remove to run this country in line with our constitution. And these 400 seats, if they were to vote, I believe over 75%, they can even change the constitution which runs this country. Then we're voting for provinces, for our provincial legislatures. We've got 9 provinces in South Africa, and each provincial legislature has between 30 to 80 members. I think there's about 2 or 3 of the provinces that have about 30. Some have like about 40. There's one with 73 or so. And then there's, I think it may be KZN that has 80. I think Gauteng has 73. The Western Cape has 42. And then there's some with 30. Which are, if I were to simplify it for people, the provincial legislature is almost like your parliament for your province. In fact, the Western Cape is the only province which actually calls their, what we call the members of the executive. They call them their ministers of their provincial parliament. They call it a provincial parliament. They're a provincial legislature. And the premier, the person that runs that provincial legislature, is almost like a president for your province. And we're going to be voting for those people as well. In this provincial legislature, you have about 5 to 10 MECs, members of the executive, which are almost like ministers, as I said. We've got something called the NCOP, the National Council of Provinces, which sits at the National Assembly, which has representatives, 10, it's about 19 in total, 10 from each province. And the premiers, the leaders of the provincial structures, the provincial legislatures, also get to sit at the NCOP and discuss provincial laws. The provincial legislature is set to run laws within your province. We've got national government, which sets national laws, and then we've got the provincial structures, which sets provincial laws that are unique to each province. Of course, if you go further down with local elections, certain municipalities have what we call bylaws for whatever municipality that you're in. Just for interest, we have got 257 municipalities in this country. This was now not these elections, this was the local elections in 2021. 257 municipalities comprising of 205 local, 8 metros, and 44 district municipalities. And then in terms of wards, the area you live in, we've got 4,468. Those elections were the local elections, and those are going to come in the years coming. But just for you to know, this is the current structure: National Assembly and then the provincial legislatures. So we're going to be voting on 3 ballot papers. 3 ballot papers. The first one is called the National Compensatory Ballot. That is going to be a blue form. That is the one that so many of us are used to. We know it, we vote for it. Your favorite political party is going to be there. How the IEC has structured it, the Independent Electoral Commission, which runs the elections, is that only political parties are going to be allowed to run on this ballot. And there's currently 52 political parties that are going to be contesting for 200 seats in Parliament. I told you that Parliament has 400 seats. This is going to be half of that, 200. And only political parties are going to be running. Your favorite political parties are going to be there. 52 of them. And if you look at the 2019 elections, only 14 managed to get into Parliament. I'm guessing we might see 14 again, or maybe 16 this time around. 200. Then we've got the regional national ballot. This is a new paper and it is orange in color. They've taken Parliament and they've split it in half. 200 for political parties only. The other 200 is going to be for political parties or independent candidates. What was meant to happen is that independent candidates were meant to be running on their own for these 200 seats, but they aren't enough. And the political structure, restructuring and reform is slow in its movement. People like Dr. Michael Louis that I sat with in Cape Town are pushing this work. They've taken it all the way to the Constitutional Court to say that independent candidates should be able to run in Parliament. It's something that it was realized that it was unconstitutional in all the previous elections that we've had before. We are currently in our 7th cycle, by the way, of democratic elections. So on the second regional national ballot, which is orange, you will be able to vote for an independent candidate or for a political party. But in particular, this ballot is going to be for representatives of your specific province in the National Assembly. So every province is going to have its own independent candidates. Every province is going to have political parties that are going to go and take up 200 seats in Parliament representing the provinces, based on obviously the population of the province. And these 2 ballot papers, the blue national compensatory, the orange regional national, are going to make up 200 plus 200, which is 400 seats in Parliament. Then we're going to have our provincial ballot, which is going to be pink in color. And that's where you're voting for your provincial legislature members. Like I said, 30 to 80. Of which those 30 to 80 members are going to be voting for the premier. There you can then also choose a political party of your choice, and you can maybe choose an independent if you want. You get 1 vote per ballot. You're going to vote for a political party on the first one. You're going to vote either for a political party or an independent on the second one. And you're going to vote for either a political party or an independent on the third one. And these are going to be the 3 ballots that we're going to be voting for. In future, these might change as political restructuring kind of happens. Let me take a step back. 2019. Yeah, we are fewer. We are in our 7th democratic election cycle. We had Nelson Mandela, who was president at some point under the ANC. We've had Thabo Mbeki, who's been president under the ANC. We've had Jacob Zuma, who's been president under the ANC. At some point, we had a caretaker president, being Kgalema Motlanthe. And then we've had Cyril Ramaphosa being president under the ANC. 30 years of ANC rule. We've had many parties come and go. Many parties come and go. And now we've got new parties coming in. At the 2019 elections, we ended up with 14 parties representing parliament at the National Assembly. The ANC got 57.5% of the votes, which was 10 million votes out of 17.4 million. The DA became the official opposition at 3.6 million votes. The EFF became the second big opposition at 1.8 million votes. Of the 400 seats, the ANC got 230, the DA got 84, and the EFF got 44 seats. These are the 3 biggest parties in the country, and they're going to be competing in these elections. Number 4 and 5 at the last elections became the IFP with 14 seats, 580,000 votes, and the Freedom Front Plus conservative political party with 10 seats at 414,000 votes. Number 6 was the ACDP, the African Christian Democratic Party, at 146,000 votes with 4 seats. From number 7 all the way to 14, they have 2 seats each, with the last 2 parties having 1 seat each. The last 2 parties being the PAC, the Pan-Africanist Congress, and Al-Jama'ah, with 1 seat each. They were kind of pushed in because if you do the maths, you needed about 43,000 votes, to be honest, to get into the National Assembly. But these parties got 32,000, 31,000. And a party that got over the 43,000 was actually COPE at number 12 with 47,000 votes. And COPE got 2 seats all the way up to number 7, the UTM, the United Democratic Movement, with 2 seats as well. We also have ATM of Vuyo Zungula, the Good Party of Patricia de Lille. The NFP, the National Freedom Party, which was a breakaway from the IFP. We've got the AIC, the African Independent Congress, and I mentioned COPE as well, which had 2 seats as well. In effect, you're looking at a parliament in 2019 that was actually run by 3, 4, maybe if you push it 5 political parties. The rest of them are just there, maybe to object and to say their piece. But the ANC, 230 seats, with the number 5 party, the Freedom Front Plus, with just 10 seats only. That was the national elections. I have to mention the local elections. Why? Because many people believe that the local elections were a precursor to the national elections. We had new players coming in. The Patriotic Alliance competed at the last national elections, but they got 0.8% of the votes. They didn't get a seat at all. But they showed a decent showing at the local elections, along with another new player, Action SA, led by Herman Mashaba, which was a follow-on from the People's Dialogue when he left the DA. At the local elections, we had 11.7 million voters. The national, we had 17.4. At the local, we had 11.7 million. The ANC came up with 45% of the votes. They didn't meet 50%. And along different parts of the country, they had to go into coalition. 10.6 million votes, 45%. The DA got 21.5% of the votes with 5 million. Then the EFF got 2.4 million votes with 10%. Then at number 4, we had the IFP. At number 5, we had the Freedom Front Plus. This is in line with national elections. And then at number 6 and number 7, instead of the ACDP and the UTM, we had Action SA with 2.6% of the votes, which was 547,000. And we had the Patriotic Alliance with 226,000 votes, getting 1% of the votes. And from 2021 to 2024, 3 years later, so much has happened, so much has changed, and we've gotten new players. Who have been the new players that have come in, at least that are notable? One of them has been the ACT, the African Congress for Transformation, led by Ace Magashule, who was expelled from the ANC and was the Secretary General. I am not sure, because they were having issues with the IEC, if they're going to make it on the ballot They were asking if the date could be pushed out. They may not be on the ballot, but they're a new player. We had the son of ex-President Jacob Zuma first running as an independent and then forming a political party called the All Game Changers, AGC. Everything looks set to go for them to become a new player, and then at the last moment they were told that they didn't meet administrative requirements and they were taken off the ballot. We've got Mpho Takada, very young gentleman who's set up Arise South Africa, who also everything looked good to go. And at the last minute, they were told that they were taken off again for administrative issues. And they took the matter to court, assisted by Senior Advocate Dali Mpofu. And I'm still not sure whether they will be on the ballot or not. But I think they will be on the provincial ballot. Some other notable mentions. I'm mentioning this one even though they may not be a big factor. The Organic Humanity Movement, OHM, led by Laurent Bernardo, who are looking to dismantle the political structures as we know them. They would like independents to be the only people representing South Africans in parliament and representing various constituencies geographically around the country. That's a new player. You've of course got Action SA coming in for the first time into national elections. Many people are looking forward to see what Herman Mashaba, Michael Beaumont and the team are going to achieve. We've got the Patriotic Alliance led by Gayton McKenzie, which didn't do well at the last national elections, but did really, really well at the local elections. And Gayton McKenzie has been very, very loud, especially with immigration, crime, and he's trying to shake up the Western Cape, where the DA has had a stronghold, and going after the colored vote in particular. You've got Build One South Africa by Musi Maimane, a previous DA leader who left the DA as well, went and did some work with independent candidates, and then set up BOSA, Build One South Africa. And they also coming in as a new player. You've got Rise Mzansi, which is led by Usongezo Zibi, who's come in, and one of the reasons why they really became a talking point was because they were funded by one of the Oppenheimers, Rebecca Oppenheimer, with 15 million rand. And the question was why? They come in as part of the Rivonia Circle to say they're also putting their hand up to get into the race. And then one of the most talked about political parties and a new entry is Umkhonto weSizwe, the MK party led by ex-President Jacob Zuma, who was asked to step down as the president of South Africa and the president of the ANC, who was arrested for contempt of court with the State Capture Commission of Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, and who's been a very polarizing figure, accused of state capture, accused of selling the country to the Guptas, accused of pushing for RET when it didn't work, etc., etc. And he comes in as a new player, and he's still in and out of court for many things, including even the MK and whether he can run to sit in parliament or not. I hope enough I haven't forgotten anyone. I think I've covered most of my notes. Let me start with some of the people I've sat with, some of the people I wish I could have sat with, and some of my thoughts. Then I want to speak about my predictions for these elections. And then I want to speak about the potential future for South Africa and South Africa's governance. So people I've sat with, because as I started this video and this chat, I spoke about the fact that myself and the team at the Penuel show had to decide if we want to do political conversations. And we did. And it's been very interesting, very educational, very inspiring. It's allowed me just as an individual to be in the streets everywhere I go, to be seen as a political voice, to have my opinions, to be invited to certain platforms to discuss politics, pushed me to read the manifestos of some of the bigger political parties, to engage many politicians, even off camera, and to discuss the governance of this country. I've sat with some of the really influential political voices in this country. Dr. Sizwe Mpofu Walsh, who runs SMWX, a platform on YouTube. I've sat with Mandisa Mashego, who used to be part of the EFF. I've sat with Dan Corder, who's become a big voice as well politically. I've sat with people that have political opinion, like Zimbabwean Rutendo Matinyarare, Advocate Ike Khumalo. Myself and DJ Spoo have discussed politics in its many forms. Myself and the team at the Penuel show, Debza Kibine, Sizwe Dube, Khumutso, Murube, have spoken about politics and what we think of it. I've spoken with Uba Putum Timka. Ongama ne? Ongama Mtimka. Uputu Ongama Mtimka. And I've been on the ground, man. You know, I'm not a political activist. I'm not a politician. I'm not funded by the IEC. I'm not funded by any political party. I'm not endorsing any political party. I'm not funded by any wealthy person in the back or even poor people in the background to give my opinions. But I've been on the ground speaking to young people in various townships, in suburbia, in malls, asking who they'll vote for, asking if they know certain politicians, asking what they think about this country. It's been very eye-opening. Being on the ground and realizing how much influence branches have on the turnout of the elections and the political results at the elections. The ANC has got a monster machine. The EFF has built a really good machine. This is in townships where there are branches, where people have t-shirts, where certain political members show up at funerals and weddings, where people host workshops, seminars, get involved in charity, soup kitchens, solving certain issues. I mean, the EFF protests quite visibly, especially where there's racist incidents or so-called racist incidents. Action SA has built really good structures. They did that with the local elections and they've been building on that. Boss of Musi Maimane has been building structures. Those are very, very influential. And I've sat with some of the political leaders in this country. It's made me very angry. It's made me very disappointed. At some point, it felt like I was being inspired. And then at some point, I just realized our political structures and systems are so rigid that currently it almost doesn't matter who comes into power. They will all have to abide by the same constitution, political structures, because South Africa is not an island. And a big influence in this country are the big economic players, of which a lot of them are foreign-owned businesses. And some locally owned businesses who are the ones that fund politicians, who are the ones that fund lobby groups, who are the ones that ensure that if certain things are not running a certain way in this country, they divest their funds, they disinvest. They disinvest from certain political parties so that those parties become too weak to campaign. They stop giving board seats to certain political figures for influence. Because in effect, government has got a over 2 trillion rand budget, which a lot of big business people, local and foreign, get to enjoy and feast from, including tenderpreneurs. A lot of what you call big business in South Africa is big business because they supply government with goods, services, etc. So we're almost captured by money and the economy and the global economy. And you listen to a lot of these politicians make promises. A lot of them are fake. A lot of them are hollow. A lot of them are very idealistic and naive. But you sit with them because you want to hear what they have to offer. Because in my opinion, to be active in the governance of this country takes there are 3 important ways that you can get involved. There are many others. Number 1, voting. Nationally, provincially, and for local government. That's a way to be politically active in governance. Number 2, it's voting with your rand. A little bit of money that we have in South Africa, as South Africans and in South Africa. Who you're giving that money to gives those people the money to then influence politics at the highest levels. This could be where you buy your medicine. This could be which medical aid scheme you belong to. This could be which paid TV service offering you give money to. This could be which retail store you buy from. This could be wherever you donate your money. Churches, non-profit organizations, voting with your rand. Could be giving your money to Gift of the Givers, Action Society, AfriForum, Open Society, doesn't matter. You're giving those people the resources to be able to dictate to politicians, to big business, where this country should be going. Because when you give them money, they also get to decide who they get to employ, where they get to send their money, who you have your funeral policies with, who you invest your monies with. So voting with your rand. Then the last one is voting with your labor for those people that have jobs, the 16.7 million. Because if everyone were to stop working, or if everyone were to be intentional about who they work for, that business, that organization that you volunteer for becomes strong. Even outside of money, if you go and you invest your labor and your skills in a certain organization, they become powerful. They accumulate resources and they are able to influence governance in this country. So I sat with these guys. Duduzane Zuma was the first, all game changers, started off as an independent, very idealistic, believes in restructuring politics in this country, comes under the shadow of his father, Jacob Zuma, and unfortunately is linked to the Guptas, who are accused of state capture of sorts. He's been doing a lot of charity work in Durban, working with a really amazing businessman and a friend of his who's also been on the show, Winston Innes. Vuyo Zungula, the leader of the African Transformation Movement, ATM, which is largely funded by churches. Many people believed it was a Jacob Zuma initiative because they kind of sprung into visibility after Jacob Zuma stepped down as president of the ANC and the country. Very pro-black, but also very much about putting South Africans first. Vuyo Zungula is in my opinion, very capable young leader. They were the people that actually took President Cyril Ramaphosa to court for Phala and the scandal around dollars, apparently millions of dollars in foreign currency that were not declared in couches, which SARS found him innocent. The South African Reserve Bank found him innocent, and it's one of the scandals that we have and one of the scandals that Cyril Ramaphosa has in this country. May not be a notable political figure, but he was the first person to come and speak about Arise South Africa. Usandile Khwezi, very famous for forex trading, had some of his so-called scandals that he came to clear up on the show, but he spoke about his foray into politics, and he spoke about Arise SA before we then invited Mpho Takada, who came through and spoke about how he was an advisor to President Cyril Ramaphosa. He became a crypto millionaire. He'd done various business ventures, and he was like, it's time for young people to get involved in politics. I think a bit of naivety, an immense amount of passion, and speaking for young people. If I'm not mistaken, he's 30 years old. He might be one of probably the youngest political or presidential candidate in this country. And he's pushed and he's got many, many supporters today. His passion comes through every time he speaks. Gayton McKenzie of the Patriotic Alliance, another polarizing figure because he was an ex-convict, along with Kenny Gnene, who also works with him at the Patriotic Alliance. Left jail, became a book author speaking about his experiences, became a public speaker, met a lot of people through that journey, got into business, mining. He had a club. He had I think a food restaurant and other businesses, and then became one of the Jacob Zuma backers. And then later on became a Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma backer. And then when Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma at conference lost to Cyril Ramaphosa, he left. And they set up the Patriotic Alliance, initially focusing on coloureds and the forgotten coloured vote, largely in the Western Cape, of course, but even in places like Eldorado Park and Lenasia and those kind of places. And then the Patriotic Alliance has gone not just for coloureds, but for all South Africans, focusing on immigration and. He's aggressive, he's brash, he at some point swears like a pirate, a lot of passion. I mean, the guy was a speaker. But again, there's that history of crime. There's that history of being linked maybe to Jacob Zuma, and some people say he's aligned to the ANC. But he's been a very, very powerful voice. And he came here to speak to us. Mmusi Maimane, the guy who is called the South African Barack Obama. Great orator, very nice gentleman, devout Christian, married to a white woman, which makes his family, because he's got mixed race children, a proudly South African family, almost like a Siya Kolisi of politics. Was under the DA, unfortunately Tony Leon called him a failed experiment, left the DA, did some work with independence, and then went to build One South Africa. Luckily, we had Usisi Ayanda Ali, also of Bossa, who was recruited by Usisi names are failing me today. Hlazo Webster, Nobuntu, Usisi Nobuntu Hlazo Webster, to be under Bossa. Mmusi is really, really a loved guy by many people. Some people feel like it was a mistake to be under the DA and he was a puppet for white people and rich white people. But many people feel he's a good guy, man. Maybe not the right guy to fight some of the corrupt elements in government today, but a really good guy. They claim that they're looking for 2 million votes, which would make them the 4th biggest party in South Africa at these elections, and they are constantly doing work on the ground. I sat with him in Cape Town at some point, and then he came to visit us here. I sat with Uputu Bongani Baloyi of Shiluba. This is another new party as well. Sorry, I forgot to mention. Ishiluba. Also used to be a DA member. After the DA, he went to join Herman Mashaba's Action SA. They had a fallout, unfortunately, and then he set up Shiluba. Mentioned Ayanda Ali. We sat with a piece of history, General Bantu Olomisa, who took over the Transkei and then went to join the ANC, serving under Nelson Mandela, and then later on left the ANC. People claim that he was expelled. He says that he left and formed the United Democratic Movement, the UDM, along with Rolf Meyer, who was the chief negotiator for the National Party at CODESA, along with Cyril Ramaphosa, who was the chief negotiator for the ANC. We sat with him and he gave us an amazing history lesson on this country. Another piece of history sat with us, Reverend Kenneth Mishwe. These are people that have been serving in parliament since democracy in 1994. He sat with us and he spoke about the Christian perspective. He spoke about his views. He spoke about the fights that they put in trying to hold the government to account, especially under hard COVID lockdown. We sat with him of the ACDP. We sat with Laurent Bernardo of the Organic Humanity Movement, and, a bit hippie-ish, very progressive, looking to revolutionize our political structures and wanting more power for local municipalities. I don't think that OHM should be a political party. I do think they should be a non-profit organization, pushing for political reform, for change, fighting the constitution. I said to Tuputu Soli Msimanga of the Democratic Alliance. He's running for premier candidate for Gauteng. He spoke about the DA. We spoke about some of the conversations I had with ex-DA members, especially the black ones who had left. He gave his views. He spoke about his tenure in Tshwane. He spoke about some of the work that he'd like to see being done provincially. We had Uputu Mkhuleko Hlengwa of the Inkatha Freedom Party, especially with the IFP losing a political heavyweight in Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi last year. Mkhuleko Hlengwa came through as a young leader. The IFP is currently being led by Uvelenkosini Hlabisa. By the way, the DA is being led by John Steenhuisen. He came and he gave us an amazing history lesson and also gave us a biography of Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi as well. Sat with the Untate Herman Mashaba of Action SA. Spoke about some of his experiences under the DA. Spoke about the People's Dialogue. Spoke about Action SA. Spoke about how he's a capitalist crusader and what he envisions for economic reform in this country and where the ANC has failed. Spoke about how he refuses to go into coalition with the ANC and spoke about even the multi-party charter, because there are these political parties led by the DA that have formed some type of a pre-election coalition to try and topple the ANC. Very sadly, just before elections, the DA has said they don't mind going into coalition with the ANC to avoid the ANC going into coalition with Umkhonto weSizwe and with the EFF. Then on my other platform, on the Penuel channel, Dope Conversations, I've said with Tuputi, Dr. Mgcini Chwaku, who is the MMC of Public Safety in Johannesburg and an EFF leader. We spoke about some of the work he's doing in Johannesburg, some of the work they envision for Johannesburg. We touched on some EFF policies, especially some of the policies that may be misunderstood by people or that people find that they don't like. Open border policy and what that means, the land issue, etc., etc. And we spoke about some of that. I spoke to Funzi Ngobeni, who is the premier candidate for Gauteng for Action SA. And he spoke about some of the work that they've been doing. I mean, he served under Herman Mashaba when he was the mayor. He used to be part of the DA and he left. Very sadly, a couple of weeks ago, he was hijacked along with another Action SA leader. They were hijacked and they were kidnapped. Luckily, they were released a day thereafter and he recounted that experience. And then I said to Tusisu Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, the national chairperson of Rise Mzansi and the premier candidate for Gauteng for Rise Mzansi. And we spoke about her entrepreneurial journey. We spoke about what Rise Mzansi stands for, the fact that they got funding from the Oppenheimers, if they are not maybe being sent, and their views on politics and political reform and. So these are the people that I sat with on the various platforms. I hope I haven't forgotten anyone. Some of the politicians I failed to get, and I mentioned failed to get because there was actually an effort. Kenny Gnane of the Patriotic Alliance, he's the Gauteng premier candidate for the PA. We had spoken, and I think it was a matter of scheduling. Kenny is a gent I've sat with on platforms. We've spoken before. We've had great chats. He's a really, really charismatic gent. Unfortunately, because of scheduling, we couldn't sit. That was going to be one of the people I was going to sit with before the elections. Usisu Tutuzile Zuma Sambudla, who happens to be the twin sister of Ututuzane Zuma, is working with her father, Utumkhonto Wesizwe. She's not supporting her brother's AGC, and many people have thought Umkhonto Wesizwe is a political party for the family, Jacob Zuma, maybe his daughter Tutuzile, maybe his son Tutuzane, but Tutuzane is not there. Jacob Zuma's got another daughter that people maybe don't know much about, who is deemed a political heavyweight for people that know, Uthuthukile Zuma, who also happens to be the daughter of Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma. She's been a leader of the ANC Youth League, and she's probably going to move up the structures in the ANC as well. So Tutuzile, I managed to DM her, I think on Twitter and on Instagram. And unfortunately, I never got the chance to sit with her. She did luckily get to sit with Warwick Stock, DJ Waras, and PH on the Real Network. And if you maybe go there, you can listen to some of her thoughts as well. I contacted Floyd Shibambu of the EFF, one of my favorite politicians and probably one of the smartest politicians we have in parliament. I tried to contact Mbuyiseni Ndlovu, who is the premier candidate in Gauteng for the EFF. Unfortunately, they never returned my WhatsApps and they never returned my SMSs as well. I would have really loved to sit with them as well. I did speak to Uputu Snau Tambo of the EFF. I believe he's their national spokesperson, if I'm not mistaken. He'd said he'd get back to me about sitting with me or getting one of the leadership of the EFF to sit with me. Unfortunately, he got back to me and he said they were not interested in sitting with me. This is not something I wanted to discuss, but I will mention it because it's important now. There have been times when I've called out the EFF for being potential flip-floppers. I have mentioned that I voted for the EFF in 2019, but I'm not voting for them anymore. And it may be that some people feel that I'm anti-EFF, which is not really true. I'd like to think whenever I sit with anyone, whether I agree with them or not, I'm professional and I give people a chance to sit. I may not be fully sure, because he didn't give me reasons why Usnawo Tambo would feel the need to say they're not interested in sitting with me. It could be that my platform is not big enough, which is very fair. It could be that for whatever reason they feel that I'm not someone they want to sit with, just as an individual. They could feel that they have more important work to do, sitting on mainstream media. Some of the EFF leadership has sat on SMWX with Dr. Sizimpofu Walsh, and the EFF themselves have set up their own podcast. So in essence, they don't necessarily need to sit on other people's podcasts when they can do this on their own. So yeah, there was that. And then for some people, there was Julius Malema speaking about a MacG wannabe at a time when himself and Elon Musk had a small spat on Twitter/X, and I'd made a video which had gone viral about how I felt both Elon Musk and Julius Malema had been wrong around the whole issue of Dubuli Punu, Kill the Poor song. And I don't know if that may be part of the issue. Naledi Chirwa is someone that I'd spoken to, a young leader in the EFF. She was the one that enabled me to sit with Dr. Mgcini Chwaku of the EFF. I tried to get a sit down with her as well, and unfortunately she hadn't responded to my WhatsApps for us to have the sit down, even though I got to sit with Dr. Chwaku. I met Velenkosini Hlabisa, Mr. Velenkosini Hlabisa of the IFP, who's the current leader. I was with him in Hermanus at a BizNews conference, and I'd spoken to his executive assistant, and we'd just been looking to find a date to sit. But now, as the elections are upon us, there just unfortunately will not be time to sit with him. But I am really relieved that I got to sit with Uputu Mkhuleko Hlengwa of the IFP to represent the IFP at least. Myself and Chris Papas, who is the mayor of Umgeni in KZN, a leader of the DA. He is the KwaZulu-Natal premier candidate for the DA, a Zulu boy, a white Zulu boy from KZN. We had actually set a date to sit and chat. And unfortunately, he was no longer traveling to Johannesburg, so we had to cancel that sit down. But he sounded very keen to sit with me. I'd spoken to his one of the people that works in his team and his office. And unfortunately, that never got to happen. But this was one of the people I failed, unfortunately, to sit with. I'd send texts to Fikile Mbalula. That would be someone very interesting to sit with. I've got very strong opinions about Fikile Mbalula. I've called him out on social media. I know he probably isn't happy with some of the things I've said about him as well. But I'd really love to sit with him, even outside of the elections, because he's a very interesting character and he's currently the Secretary General of the ANC. And he unfortunately never responded to any of my WhatsApp texts as well. I tried to speak to the office of Panyaza Lesufi, who is the current Premier of Gauteng and the Gauteng Premier candidate for the ANC. He used to be the MEC of Education in Gauteng. And unfortunately, because of his busy schedule, I couldn't sit with him as well. His team did respond to me. And unfortunately, they said he was just too busy. Luckily, he did sit with DJ Sbu, I think a year or two ago. I think this may have been before he became Premier, I'm not sure. But they've said I was meant to be with them on that day. Unfortunately, I had another engagement to get to. I know Chris Papas has sat with Dan Corder as well. So you can go and check out some of those conversations. I would have loved to sit with Peter Groenewald, the leader of the Freedom Front Plus. I sent an email to his office. They'd responded to one of my emails, and then they didn't respond to one of my other emails, and unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to follow up. It would be very, very interesting to find out what the Freedom Front Plus stands for, if they are a white racist party, or if they actually stand for other South Africans who are not white, who are not Afrikaans, and their vision for South Africa. One of my favorite leaders in this country, another piece of history, because he hasn't only sat in parliament since 1994 under democracy, he also sat in the apartheid government, the last one, Dr. Corneille Mulder. If you ever watch his sit down with Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh, if you ever watch some of his speeches, he has such a sober mind. He's a peacekeeper whenever there are political squabbles. He is brilliant in coalition conversations. And I think he's a really, really great leader. It would have been great. It would still be great to sit with Corneille Mulder. I've had the privilege of sitting with him at a lunch with many, many other people that were sitting there. And is really someone that I think is really a great asset to this country. I'm the reason I never sat with this lady. And again, it's just because of scheduling and time. Usiswamu Nobuntu Hlazo Webster, who is, I could be mistaken, but I think the national chairperson of BOSA, Build One South Africa. She is the premier candidate for Gauteng, for BOSA. Brilliant woman. She was in business as well, very well spoken, very articulate. And I'm hoping that maybe even after the elections, I can sit with her and have a chat. Because some of the conversations I've had with some of the female leaders, Ayanda Ali, Vuyiswa Ramokgopa, Mandisa Mashego, etc., is why is politics so male-dominated? And in particular, black male-dominated? And is it not time for black women to rise up and maybe collaborate with one another? I mean, you've had people like Ulindiwe Mazibuko of the DA. You know, we've got Mamnaledi Pando in the ANC. Phumzile Van Dam. We had Dr. Rampele. Oh, ngiyaxolisa mama. Let me get a name. Rampele. Dr. Mampela Rampele of Achang as well. And we've got so many capable young female leaders, Naledi Chirwa as being one of them, that could come together and actually have a push. Umamu Patricia DeLille as well. And how they can push for a stronger female voice in this country. And I think Sisu Nobuntu is one of those amazing young leaders. There are people that I didn't want to sit with. And I'm sorry that I'm raising this here, but you know, in the interest of just complete honesty and transparency. This guy was probably never going to sit on a podcast. Number one, because he is extremely busy. And I understand this. There are way bigger platforms. He's constantly traveling. He has got so many stakeholders to cater to. President Cyril Ramaphosa. Unfortunately, he is someone that gaslights and upsets me in various ways. And it's not just him. I mean, even someone like Fikile Mbalula. But I really had to think deep about whether I'd want to sit with Cyril Ramaphosa. My fear with sitting with him is that I would probably have to pre-send the questions. The conversation would have to probably be curated. And there's a chance that even if I ask inappropriate or sensitive questions, they would probably be edited out in the final piece that you guys get to see. It would be nice if we were to get presidents, who actually were to sit. I know ex-President Jacob Zuma sat with Dr. Sizwe Mpofu-Walsh as well. And he's been one of the people that, I was really hoping he would be a surprise guest because I'd spoken to people in his team and we were meant to just find a schedule to sit with him. It was going to be a really pleasant surprise, not just for our team, because I tend to not tell the team who the guest is going to be, but even for my audience. To sit with Umsholozi, Ubabukele Zuma, Ungamalala. He's sat on a podcast. President Cyril Ramaphosa I don't see happening. And you'd hope that we were to get leaders the same vein as people like Barack Obama, who are more out there with the people, who are willing to sit on a podcast, chat with like a Trevor Noah, and speak about what's happening in this country, touch on family and those kind of things. But I was 50-50 on sitting with him. And I know if I'd gotten through to his office and we'd sat, I would have agreed. But I would have known that it would have been a very curated exercise. I had mixed feelings about sitting with John Steenhuisen, the leader of the Democratic Alliance. I've got my own issues with the DA. I've spoken about them on social media. A lot of the black leaders that have left the DA have spoken about the racial undertones and probably structural racism in certain parts of the DA. He had a really great sit down with Mac G and Sol Penduga, I believe, on Podcast and Chill. Humanized him, said a few things that upset people there, but I think John Steenhuisen is a great gent. I think he's really trying. But sitting with him again, especially in election season, would probably be a lot of ANC bashing. I don't know if I would have gotten what I wanted. So I was 50-50 about sitting with him as well. But I did try and reach out to his team. I'm not going to deny that. I did try and reach out to his team. And I'm not sure if it was a scheduling issue or if they stopped responding or if I didn't follow up as well. And then the last one is Julius Malema. Julius Malema is, outside of Jacob Zuma, probably the most influential, vocal, articulate, riveting politicians in South Africa and arguably on the African continent. He is a true force. He is a gent that has inspired so many young leaders, including myself. I mean, he may bash him today, but at some point, Nhlanhla Lux, at some point, Operation Tutula and then Soweto Parliament, at some point, Nhlanhla Lux was giving a huge shout out to Julius Malema. The way he set up the EFF, they celebrated 10 years, the ability to also be able to attract amazing leadership, Flo Chibambu, Mbuyiseni Ndlovu, Mam Kaula, Ugadi. Today, they've attracted Mzwanele Manyi, the ex-public protector, Mkhwebane. Julius is amazing. And look, he's amazing to a point where he gets to sit and interview judges as part of the JSC. He gets to sit at the African Parliament. The guy is literally being groomed by so many different people to be a sensational leader. But I've been disappointed by his politics. I have felt that he's a flip-flopper. I do feel that he does not walk the talk. And because of some of the things and some of his abrasive nature on platforms, I was also 50-50 about sitting with him. I would love to sit with Julius and have a chat, just outie to outie, about politics, about his upbringing in politics, speaking to him about how he felt disappointed, maybe stabbed in the back by Jacob Zuma when he was expelled from the ANC. The whole story about Ubabaga Tutuzane and the fact that maybe Julius felt hurt, that Jacob Zuma is someone that we were willing to kill for. But when there are economic opportunities, he seems to have those placed aside for his own children, because that seemed to be the narrative. Maybe touch on some of the scandals and the rumors that have been out there of, did he ever have a relationship with Tutuzane's twin sister, Tutuzile? And what's their relationship like? Tutuzile loves speaking favorably of the EFF. She loves speaking favorably about the commander-in-chief, the CIC, Julius Malema, and what that means. Speaking about some of the clashes he's had with certain politicians. Speaking about dictatorship. Speaking about the future of this country. Speaking about the land question. Speaking about foreigners and One Africa and open borders and what that means. The guy gets on platforms and literally viewer ratings go berserk. One of the most watched sit-downs on Podcast and Chill is Mac G sitting with Julius Malema. And I believe they were sitting at Winnie Madikizela House, which is the EFF's headquarters. The riveting speech he gave at Winnie Madikizela Mandela's memorial service, and the way they've fought at the EFF for her to be truly, truly recognized as a force. Julius is part of our political history, and it would be a great conversation. But election season, and specifically with me, my brand, I was a bit nervous about potentially sitting with him. And again, almost like Cyril, I was going to agree to sit with him, but I was going to be expecting to just sit and maybe just let him speak. And maybe not raise some of the more colorful and arguably controversial questions and thoughts that I may have. Who knows, maybe if I sat with him, he would have won my heart over again. And who knows, maybe I'd be considering voting for the EFF again. But unfortunately, I'm not. And that's some of the work that we've done. Paul Mashatile is the last name. Sorry. I don't know if Paul Mashatile is worth sitting with right now. Maybe if one day he becomes a compromise candidate, maybe Paul Mashatile might be president of the country. There was a time when there were rumors that Cyril Ramaphosa was about to hand in his resignation. It was after Phala and those things. But apparently his leadership team convinced him to stay. Paul Mashatile was going to come in. At some point, people thought Didi Mabuza might have more of a role to play. He was deputy president. Arguably the most silent, most invisible deputy president we've ever had. He's left politics. He was nominated for deputy president again and he said no thanks. So maybe in time, Paul Mashatile, if the ANC government gets under 50% in these elections, some people have said that Cyril Ramaphosa may not want to be part of a coalition government and he might step aside and say, I'm going to go back into business. And Paul Mashatile may be asked to become the coalition president of the ANC and maybe a coalition president of South Africa. If a coalition comes after the 29th of May, meaning the ANC gets under 50%, the ANC is going to have to look for people that are going to be willing to donate their votes whenever they have to decide on policy, decide on who's going to be the president of the country in parliament, etc. If they get 48%, they're going to need 2-3%. And the EFF at the last elections got 10%. So the EFF is a party that could be like, even if you get 45-46%, we can push you over the age to 50. But Julius Malema has said that if the ANC wants to go into coalition, they've got two very big T's and C's, terms and conditions. The first one is that President Cyril Ramaphosa steps down as president. They don't want him to be president, which arguably means the EFF would like Paul Mashatile to be there. The second one is they would like Floyd Shibambu to be the Minister of Finance, position that's currently held by Mr. Enoch Kotongwana. At some point, it was Tito Mboweni. At some point, it was, I believe, Pravin Gordhan. At some point, it was Trevor Manuel. There was a time when I think Umalusi Kikaba held the post, and then Zuma tried to give us Uba Ngonje Luputi, that was Minister of Finance for like one day and then removed. So we don't know if that'll work. Or maybe if they'll have another conversation. If they get to 48-49%, and Jacob Zuma's Mkhonto Wesizwe gets 2-3%, who knows? Maybe they might be willing to lend their votes. Some people have said that the Patriotic Alliance of Gayton McKenzie is more ANC-leaning. Gayton McKenzie has gone on platforms to explain why he has issues with the DA and in particular Helen Zille, because he feels that they've been very disrespectful. And that's why he's not willing to work with them, because he was willing to work with them at some point and he feels like they snaked him. And again, this is the guy that was a big fan of Jacob Zuma and the ANC at some point. So if the Patriotic Alliance gets 2%, who knows? They might, if the ANC gets 49%, be like, we'll give you our votes. Maybe as long as Gayton McKenzie becomes a minister, maybe Kenny Kunene becomes a minister, who knows? And the DA has said one of the things they fear is the ANC maybe getting 45% and then saying we want to go into coalition with the EFF and the MK. And they're like, we don't want that at all. So we as the DA will be willing to. The last elections, I think they got 23%, if I'm not mistaken. Let me get the exact figure. They got, I'll tell you now. Just over 20% of the votes at the last elections. So if the ANC goes to 45, some polls had the ANC at 37, the DA will be like, look, we'll give you some of our votes. They'll have their terms and conditions. They prefer Cyril Ramaphosa as president more than Paul Mashatile. Who knows? John Steenhuisen might be deputy president of the country with Cyril as president in that coalition. That's if we go into a coalition. Then we go into my predictions, which I've mentioned on a platform. I do think Parliament is going to consist, out of the 52 parties, of maybe 14 again, maybe all the way up to 16. I see parties like Al Jama'ah, which has been responsible for 2 mayors in Johannesburg, under compromise, after losing Paul Palazzo of the DA, after having an ANC mayor, all of these vote of confidence nonsense. I see Al Jama'ah, which had 31,000 votes at the last elections. I see them potentially losing their 1 seat in Parliament. I see potentially the PAC with 32,000 votes at the last elections in their 1 seat. I see them potentially falling out and not having a parliamentary seat. COPE, under Musiwa Lekota, Tera Lekota, used to be an ANC heavyweight. They got 47,000 votes at the last elections. They've had a lot of internal squabbles as well. I see them potentially losing their 2 seats in Parliament. So these 3 parties, COPE, PAC, Al Jama'ah, maybe I'll add 4, the African Independent Congress, they might also go. 48,000 votes. There are people that have a theory because they don't know who the AIC is. Guti maybe at a city ANC kwavele kwaphunyuka. Because we don't have maybe the most literate voting population. And I mean, there's people that go to vote drunk, hungover, high. There are old people there. There are people that have to use glasses. There are people that are meant to be wearing glasses but don't. And because the ballot paper sits in alphabetical order, you might think you're putting a cross somewhere. And you're actually voting for the wrong party. We don't know who the AIC is. Maybe some people know the African Independent Congress, but some people may feel that these 48,000 votes were a mistake, and who knows, they may lose their 2 seats as well. The NFP, 61,000 votes, might retain a seat. I'm not sure. Patricia de Lille, 70,000, is probably going to retain her 2 seats. Vuyo Zungula's ATM at 2 seats. Vuyo Zungula has been very brilliant. A lot of young people really, really love him as a leader. He speaks very well. He's very strong, very brave. He may not have the money. He may not have the structures, but people really like his leadership. And who knows, he may go from 2 to 3, maybe even 4 seats. General Bantu Olomisa's got 2 seats. Hopefully he's going to retain his seats. You've got Ngabayomzi Kwankwa, who's a very young, capable, brilliant leader, almost in the same vein as Vuyo Zungula, who makes very good use of his seat as well. And many people, especially after watching the sit down on the Penuel show, were like, no, man, this is a man of integrity and ethics and definitely worth a vote. That becomes the number 7 to number 14 at the last elections. My gut feel is that the bottom 4, the AIC, COPE, PAC, Al Jama'ah, are probably going to be gone. Maybe NFP will stay. I think good ATM, the UDM will stay. The top 6, I believe, largely are going to keep their seats. At number 6, you've got the ACDP, 146,000 votes. This is a core of voters under Reverend Kenneth Mishwe. Many people loved to sit down with him as well. 4 seats. Not a lot of seats. But he's been there since 94. Still a capable leader. Still loved by a lot of people. Still gets a lot of good support. So they may keep their 4 seats. Maybe 3 seats. Who knows? But they seem to have a very core voting base. Similar to the number 5, the Freedom Front Plus. I know they may be looking to gain some votes. Because you must remember in 2019, the DA's face was Musi Maimane. And there were many conservative, white, some of them racist people who would vote DA but would refuse to vote for a black leader, regardless of what he stands for. And many of them gave their votes for the Freedom Front Plus. And now that the DA has gone back to having a white face and has lost a lot of their black leadership in Herman Mashaba, Bongani Baloyi, Funzi Ngobeni, and others, those people might be like, okay, this is the good old DA. And maybe the Freedom Front Plus may lose some of their votes. We don't know. Or maybe some conservative, white, maybe even racist people are going to be like, we actually want the Freedom Front Plus more than anything. The Freedom Front Plus currently enjoys 10 seats. 10 seats in parliament. They might retain their 10 seats, led by Peter Groenewald. Then you've got the top four. ANC, DA, EFF, and I want to speak about the IFP. It's a question I asked Khulego Hlengwa, one of the young leaders. They were the fourth biggest political party with 588,000 votes and 14 seats. In 1994, the IFP was a huge party. They got over 1.3 million votes. At that time, they were a huge opposition. Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Many people are not aware of the politics of Velinkosi Nhlabisa. Even the posters of the IFP, most of them have got Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi. Their hashtag is Do It For Shenge. Do It For Buthelezi. Vote for the legacy of Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi. And I don't know if the IFP is going to remain as strong as it used to be. Are they going to retain these 14 seats or are they going to go down? They've been dwindling since 1994. Similar thing has been happening with the UDM, and it was one of the questions I asked General Bantu Olomisa as well. I see the IFP dropping down. I potentially see the Freedom Front Plus dropping down, and both of them leaving the top five. The top three, I think, largely will remain the top three, but there's going to be a change. My predictions, these are mine. These are not based on polls. These are not based on asking anyone. These are based on sitting with politicians, looking at the ground, looking at this data that I'm giving you now about the last elections, looking at the last local elections, and getting a feel of what the average voter in this country is going to be voting for. We had 26 million registered voters last time. We've got about 27.7 million registered now. Over 1 million new voters. Registered voters. 17.4 million valid votes. I think over 200,000 spoiled ballots, which would account for maybe 8 seats in parliament. The spoiled ballots. Of the 17.4 million, a lot of people have become despondent, getting a lot of kids that have turned 18, a lot of people that didn't vote last time and maybe felt left out. A lot of people saying, for the first time, I actually want to raise my voice. A lot of people saying, I never had a political party to vote for. I now actually feel like I have one. So you may find that we might have 18, maybe 18.5 million. Or if people are really fed up, we might remain at 17 or maybe even go down to 16 million. It's going to be very interesting. I see the ANC, which got 57.5% last time, going down to 52%. So according to my opinion, they are just going to make the majority, which means they don't go into coalition. I hope the ANC goes under 50. I hope the ANC gets to 45. I hope. But based on rationality and my feel, I think they're going to hit 52%, which means they're going to lose 5.5%. That's significant if it happens. There are people that have said that if Cyril goes down under 57, even if they get to 50, he'll have to step down because he will have failed as a leader. There are very few people that believe the ANC is going to grow from 57.5 to higher. Very few. The DA at just over 20% of the votes, I believe, is going to go down to 18%. I think with the breakaway of Herman Mashaba and Action SA, I think with the breakaway of Musi Maimane and Bosa, I'm not sure how many people Bongani Baloyi will get with Shiluba. I think with the new party like Rise, Mzansi, they're going to be attracting a lot of upwardly mobile black diamonds, what we call clever blacks sometimes, who used to vote for the DA. I think there are a lot of progressive white people who maybe don't like what the DA stands for anymore. And who are like, no, I'll vote for Musi. I like Musi. I like Herman. Herman in action, they voted for him at the local elections. Michael Beaumont. Like I said, there may be some conservative white, some maybe racist people who made vote for the Freedom Front Plus. So I see the DA going from 20 to 18%. This is my gut feel and my prediction. I see the EFF growing. Of the big boys, I see the EFF as being the only party that grows. Why? So they had close to 11%, 10.8%. They kind of remained just over 10% as well at the local elections. But the EFF has managed to win the hearts of many young people. A lot of high school students who have hit 18. A lot of tertiary students at University of Technology, at universities, at colleges. If you look at a lot of SRCs at tertiary institutions, a lot of them have been overtaken by the EFF, Student Command. And I think a lot of them are going to be voting. A lot of them are going to be getting involved. I see the EFF going from 10.8 and going all the way to 13%, 1-3. Celebrate a decade of the EFF, have been very vocal, have given the black child that has been forgotten a voice. The poor black child, 13%. Some people are saying the EFF is going to dethrone the DA as the official opposition. Some people have the EFF at over 20%. And I say, look, I think you would be right if it wasn't for the fact that the EFF seems to be not considerate of putting South Africans first. They seem to protect a lot of foreigners, in particular African foreigners, being more specific, illegal African foreigners that are here. Where Julius Malema has uttered words like, people must find creative ways to enter the country. Some people do feel like the EFF flip-flops as well. So I think some of those things are going to hurt them at the elections. And where they maybe could have gone from 10% to 15%, I think they're going to go up to 13%. Who knows? They may remain the same. They may grow slightly. It would be sad if they dip because of this open border thing as well. But I predict them at 13%. So the ANC goes from 57.5% to 52%. They go down. The DA go from 20.7% to 18%. They go down. And the EFF in the top three go from 10.8% to 13%. I did mention that I see the IFP and the Freedom Front Plus being displaced as number 4 and number 5. Who would displace them? And I think the people that are going to displace them, in my opinion, are going to be number 1, Action SA. I see Herman Mashaba's Action SA coming in as potentially the 4th biggest political party in this country. I just want to go back to my notes. Action SA came in as the 6th biggest political party at the local elections with 547,000 votes. 547,000. If they were to get 547,000 votes at the national elections, they would be the 5th biggest party in the country. So if they just keep this momentum, they move to number 5. But I think they're going to eclipse the IFP, particularly, like I said, because we've lost Chief Mangosuthu Buthelezi. So I see Action SA coming in after the EFF, and I potentially see the Patriotic Alliance coming in after Action SA to be the 5th biggest party. I think a lot of colored people are going to be moving away from the Democratic Alliance and looking to maybe understand. I mean, we've been seeing it in some of the by-elections. Looking maybe to a PA, maybe some looking to Patricia de Lille's Good Party. Some maybe looking into some of the others, Action SA, maybe Rise, maybe Musi Maimani's Bossa. So I think some of those votes are going to be going there. I've met colored people in the streets that have said they're voting for Jacob Zuma's Mkhonto weSizwe. Bossa's going for 2 million votes. They may get a seat or 2 in parliament. I'm unfortunately not as optimistic, even though they're doing really, really amazing work on the ground. But it would be nice to have Musi Maimane sit in parliament. Maybe even Usis Nobuntu, Hlazo Webster sitting in parliament, I think would be really dope. There are many people that are liking Usongezo Zibi and what he has to say. It would be nice if Rise Mzansi was to get 1 seat in parliament. I spoke about the 4 parties that I think are going to exit, but these are going to be some of the parties that I think are going to be new entries. Action SA, the Patriotic Alliance, Bold One South Africa, Rise Mzansi. So those 4 replace the current 4. And then there may be Mkhonto weSizwe under Jacob Zuma coming in. Mkhonto weSizwe represents an ANC faction that many people loved, RET, they felt there was transformation somewhere. Umkhonto weSizwe represents, for some people that believe in tribalism politics, certain Zulu voters who maybe were not feeling the ANC of Cyril Ramaphosa and who had given their vote to the IFP and will now take their vote from the IFP and give it to Jacob Zuma's Umkhonto weSizwe. There are many fans of what Umkhonto weSizwe may represent. The BLF, Black First, Land First, the leader, Andile Mngxitama, who used to be one of the leaders of the EFF, and then there was a fallout and he left. He's behind the push for Umkhonto weSizwe. We had Ubongi Nkosi Khanyile, who was one of the leaders. I think he was jailed for so-called unrest. He was one of the youth leaders of Umkhonto weSizwe. Unfortunately, he was demoted to a regular member. There have been a lot of scandals, unfortunately, with the guy who registered it, Jabulani Khumalo, being accused of taking money and a car from Ozweli Mkhize at the ANC and other such, and some of the other leaders at MK as well. And then they've had the in and outs in court. But there are many people who were not going to vote because they upset with the ANC, because they feel they don't trust the EFF, and because none of the other parties spoke to them. And they might go with Umkhonto weSizwe. There are people that feel like Umkhonto weSizwe may be at the same level as the EFF. Then there are people who are like Umkhonto weSizwe, Zuma versus Ramaphosa. Everyone's going to vote for, which I think that's out. But I think if Umkhonto weSizwe could get 2 seats, maybe go all the way to IFP numbers and get 4 seats, who knows? So that might take us to 15 political parties representing parliament. And then there might be conversations around how our provincial structures are going to look. I'm tired of talking. Must I keep going, sis? I'm tired.
Do you have more stuff?
I've got more stuff.
Let's go.
I'm almost at 1.5 hours.
We are slap bad man at 1.5 hours.
Is it? Sorry, I know normally you don't like staring at my face for this long. There's normally like a pretty, sometimes pretty face on the other side, or sometimes an old, tired. Let's close it off. So I've spoken about the history of this country, where we come from. 1652. Thank you, Sizwe Dube, for that. When Abo Jan van Riebeeck came here, we spoke about the British Union. We spoke about the apartheid government of the National Party. We spoke about political prisoners and the struggle for liberation. Obviously, I have to give a special mention to people like Chris Hani that we lost to assassination. Special shout out to Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, one of the leaders and the founder of the PAC, the only prisoner who was isolated by himself. We have to give a shout out to the father of black consciousness in South Africa, Stephen Bantu Biko. All the people we've lost, people like Solomon Mahlangu, the youth of 1976. Who was the poster child of 76?
Yes.
No. I hate having to Google. Hector Peterson. And so many other people. People that went into exile, people that joined the guerrilla armies, people that went to get military training. The support of countries like Russia with Kalashnikovs, the AK-47 guns. Support from some of the Middle Eastern countries. I mean, it's one of the reasons why the ANC is pro-Palestine, because they offered support at a time when Israel was supporting the apartheid government. Some of the people, the musicians, the Huma Segelas, the Miriam Makebas, some of the musicians that went out there to be activists, music, Ubab Kefa Smenya, Letambulu, not yet Uhuru, not yet free. All the African nations that were involved in the liberation of this country, including our neighbors, Lesotho, Botswana, Zimbabwe, that were involved, in the liberation, including Zambia, some of the countries that really supported us, man. And the country that we have now and the democracy we've had. Have to give a special mention, man, to the African National Congress. Some of us may be frustrated with them now, but many people have a home today, over 3 million RTP houses. Many people today have tarred roads where there was gravel or no road. Many streets now have street lights that didn't exist. I grew up visiting my grandmother and my grandmother's sister where there was a long drop toilet, where there was the bucket system. And those are gone, and there's flushable toilets today. Many homes got electricity, even though we may not have electricity after the elections with the resurgence of load shedding. Many children got access to basic education. Over 65% of our schools are no-fee schools. People having access to free healthcare, of which today we have NHI. Public healthcare system is not great. Many people having access to a tertiary education they would have only dreamed of. Black children, colored children, Indian children that are today doctors, lawyers, accountants, engineers, actuarial scientists, civil engineers, bankers, entrepreneurs, business people that have amazing tertiary qualifications in IT. Some are based all over the world, offering value to the world because of some of the work done by the ANC. Look, and other political parties, of course, but look, an ANC-led government and some of the ministers and some of the members of parliament that have come through. The quota system, which was deemed very controversial, but we get to celebrate a Springbok back-to-back victory of the World Cup with Siya Kolisi as a black captain. We had Abo Chilipo Ralepele as captains at some point, and the youngest Springbok captain. Some people may disagree with me, but as someone who's been in the rugby fraternity, I can tell you now, people like Olukanyo Amna, Magazole Mapimpi probably would not be known if it wasn't for the quota system. Abo Cheslin Colby, Kanan Moody, Mani Libok, Damian Willemse. That's some of the work, controversially so. Had Abo Ngonde Bal for Abo Steve Chwete, etc., fighting for these things. People having access to job opportunities, underemployment equity, and affirmative action. Where people speak about meritocracy, and you're like, if we let certain white people get to pick who they employ, they would have never picked certain black kids. Females, never, if it wasn't for certain PE requirements. They can kick and scream and whatever, but the reality is, that is what it is today. So we have to give a shout out to the ANC. Unfortunately, they seem to have dropped the ball. And the focus has become so much on self-enrichment, with rampant corruption, the destruction of state-owned enterprises. The ANC itself has decimated its youth league. That's why the EFF came to become. They destroyed the youth league. They have kept young people out. They have abandoned some of the ideals that were penned in the Freedom Charter. Nationalization as a concept. The idea of making sure that the people get the land. A lot of ANC leaders are multimillionaires and billionaires today. Mamlindiwe Sisulu has raised these things, that people became billionaires and millionaires overnight, and they kind of sold out the people. We seem to have gotten poorer. Income inequality has gotten worse, to a point where in the last couple of years, there are black people uttering very, very sad sentiments of maybe things were better during apartheid. The crime wasn't that bad. Our borders were secure. People had jobs. Families were together. Our state-owned enterprises were working. We saw Eskom being built, Sasol being built, ISCO being built, Armsco being built. These have been destroyed. You've got the nouveau black elite, Cyril, Patrice, Saki Macozomo, Mzi Khumalo, Lazarus Zim, Dr. Anna Mokhokong. I can keep going. That have become rich of board seats and equity deals. Tebe Investments, Chancellor House, Pimbani, Pamodzi, Shanduga, Mvelapanda, Yatokyo Sehwale. We've gotten a lot of tender corruption, where guys are buying fancy cars, taking girls to Dubai, spending money at Konka, popping bottles, money laundering, scandals under people like Edwin Sodi, etc. And it seems services are not being given to the people. Making money is the order of the day. Tenderpreneurs are killing each other. Politicians, especially in places like KZN, killing each other for positions so they can access certain budgets. We had Life as Dimeni. We had Marikana, London mining, where Cyril was there, involved, where At some point, he was the leader of the National Union of Mine Workers. Next thing, he's part of the people that are involved in the gunning down of miners striking for better wages. Life is demanding and the tragedies there. The looting that happened under the coronavirus, COVID lockdown. Money that went missing. As of recently, there was a fund for flooding in KZN, Durban. It's come out now that money's been looted. It's become a running joke on social media that whenever there's a new budget, if the NHI system is going to be getting more money for activations, for promotions, for workshops, more money for the Department of Health, people are like the comrades and the cadres are going to be eating. There's a culture of eating and bribery and corruption. Elon Musk's Starlink wants to come into South Africa, but they will not come in unless they work with certain BEE partners. Our commodities have been given to Glencore, very controversial commodities trading company, which is involved in Astron Energy. They took it from Chevron, which was Caltex. They might be involved in Transnet and the resurgence of Transnet, which is a privatization model. Another big commodities, very controversial commodities trading company, Vitol, has bought from the Malaysian Petronas the engine stake, 74%. The BE partner there is Phuthuma Nhleko and Pimbani, which is a business associate of Cyril Ramaphosa. We've got a service station called Puma, which is owned by another controversial commodities trading company called Trafigura. Companies people don't know. These people are infiltrating our economies in various ways. Anglo-American is planning to hemorrhage thousands of jobs. Shell is planning to exit South Africa. It may not necessarily be the ANC and it might be part of their global strategy, but they're leaving. Other companies have closed. Other companies are disinvesting. MultiChoice, which was one of the jewels of, I think, the Broederbond and Afrikaners under Naspers. Number one, Naspers has listed in the Netherlands and left. But now MultiChoice, DSTV, is being sold to a French company, Canal Plus. Guess who the BE partner is going to be? Patrice Motsepe. Another jewel of the Afrikaner entrepreneurs is Afgri. It's been sold to Americans. Our country is being sold off piece by piece. Some of your favorite banks are owned by the Chinese. They're owned by Americans. At some point, Absa was owned by Barclays in the UK. This is under the ANC government, where we're not seeing transformation. And we're seeing black people becoming poorer. We're seeing social grant recipients, especially with the new 350 social relief for distress grant, which was rolled out during COVID. We went from something like 19 million grant recipients, a bulk of them being child grants, 530, and the old age grant, the pension, which I think is about 2,000 Rand or somewhere there. It went from about 19 million. Of course, there's a disability grant, there's the veterans, there's refugees that get grants, to close to 30 million people on grants. Half of the population. We've got between 60 and 62 million South Africans. Unemployment. Figures came out recently with Stats SA. We have got a working population, which according to our definitions is anyone from the age of 16 all the way to the age of 64. Because from 65, you're meant to step down. Funny enough, a big chunk of our parliamentarians are over the age of 65. They're meant to be retiring. The working age population from 16 to 64, 65 is over 41 million people. 41 million people. And we've got people that have a job at 16.7 million. They break it down. There's a chunk of people who are excluded for various reasons. It could be students that are in high school, could be students that are in tertiary, well excluded. There are about over 3 million people who have said they are unemployed, but they've given up on looking for work. So when you listen to the unemployment percentages, which are like 32%, they don't involve all of these people. Essentially, of the working age population, 60% of our population does not have a job. 60%. And again, I think I mentioned this earlier, of the 16.7 million that have a job, a big chunk of them are earning under 5,000 Rand a month. It's a mess. Of course, there's a lot of people excluded. People that are hawkers, people that are hustlers, maybe certain taxi drivers, certain people that don't declare their incomes, etc., etc. But people are struggling. People are poor. It might be one of the reasons we have crime. It might be one of the reasons why so many girls on social media, without realizing it, have become sex workers. You go on Instagram, you go on TikTok, and it's become a culture for girls to do dance challenges wearing almost nothing. Panties are showing, bums are showing. They're getting DMs from rich guys. Guys are taking them out. Shows like Date My Family, ask about ukbeja, girlfriend allowance. What are you going to do for me? Do you have a car? Because now all of a sudden relationships are based on money. And this is just a symptom of poverty and struggle, because women that are empowered, women that work, women that have jobs, that earn money, they don't have time to be begging men for money. They're like, I can do it for myself. They have some level of integrity, but young girls out there have made it fashionable that my boyfriend drives this. Oh, Chomi, you don't know where he sent me. Yo, he just sent me an e-wallet for my hair. A lot of men are taking their lives. Depression. And it's exacerbated by you're unemployed, you're broke. Because your life is a mess, you start drinking, pick up an alcohol abuse habit. A lot of them, because the alcohol doesn't hit enough, doesn't numb the pain enough, they go into drugs, nyaupe. Harder drugs if you can afford it. When you're drugged up, when you're high, when you're intoxicated, you're not thinking anymore. You rape. You commit crime. You steal. You become a menace to society. You take people's lives. Casual sex. You pick up diseases. And you become a virus in society. Women don't want to be with you. You're broke. Why would I be with a broke man? Our families are broken. Our children are being raised without fathers. Our children are being raised by government. A child is getting a child grant, is going to a government-free school, is getting free healthcare from a government clinic. Their mom is getting a 350 grant. Their dad is getting a 350 grant. They live in an RDP house. That child belongs to government. That is not your child. You are not working to raise that child. This is under the ANC government. How I envision the future beyond the 29th of May elections. We need to have General Bantu Olumisa spoke about a national dialogue. Ex-President Thabo Mbeki spoke about a national dialogue. We need to have CODESA 2.0 that excludes people over the age of 60 and arguably excludes people over the age of 50. If chances are you're not going to be alive in the next 30 years, you should not be sitting there. Should consult with young children under the age of 18, maybe under the age of 16. But for me in particular, from 16 all the way to maybe 50, we need to have representatives that are going to sit down and discuss all those major issues I spoke about. And what do we want the brand of South Africa to be? What do we want for this country? It could be something as silly as we want to change the national anthem to have more of a vibe and not sound like some British militant anthem. Boring. You watch Bafana Bafana when the guys are busy warming up and ikwicho. That is South African culture. Not that's not South Africa, boy. Maybe create a cooler flag. What culture do we want? What kind of a nation do we want to be? A musical nation where every kid can DJ and make music and dance? So be it. But make sure that we put a price on it and the rest of the world is paying us for our talents. Do we want to be a comedic country? And people could laugh. Aye, come on. You're like, bro, some of the wealthiest people in this country are comedians, are musicians. Black Coffee, Shimza, Zakes Bantwini, Trevor Noah. These are people bringing in foreign currency. Actors like Otusombedu, Dr. John Kani. Do we want to be a Lion King, Sarafina country? So be it, we'll decide. Do we want to invest maybe more in maths and science? Do we want to make sure that we reindustrialize? We want to speak about our energy? Do we want to focus on coal and not be dictated to by the West? and being given $8.5 billion, Abo Cyril, to potentially loot again, to tell us we must use independent power producers and go renewable when we've got a lot of coal and we want to boost our nuclear. The apartheid government had a nuclear weapons program which was dismantled before the ANC took over. We want to bring that back, and we want to remove the Pelindaba Treaty, which says Africa will be a nuclear-free zone. Why? When America's got nuclear weapons, when parts of Europe have nuclear weapons, when Russia has nuclear weapons, when North Korea and China have nuclear weapons, when the Middle East have nuclear weapons, but Africa, the poorest continent, must not be able to defend itself. Pen, we don't need nuclear weapons. If we don't need nuclear weapons, then we don't need the police. We don't need soldiers. That means we don't need sovereignty. That means we're fine with being the puppets of other nations. We need to speak about land. We need to speak about revolutionizing our education. We need to speak about maybe removing race from demographics and saying we no longer speak black, white, colored, Indian, and you're either South African or not. You meet someone and they say, I'm French. You meet someone, they say, I'm British. You meet someone, they say they're American. That's it. Must meet someone, they say they're South African. I'm an Indian South African. I'm a colored South African. I'm a black. No. I'm just a South African, and we need to have those conversations. So this would be a work in progress, maybe over a period of 5 years. Maybe from 2024 all the way to 2030. And then we pass it on to the next generation and say in 30 to 50 years, you guys can then sit down. And we've given you maybe a reworked constitution, a reworked political structure. We've brought in blockchain. We've brought in a new type of currency. We've brought in, maybe we've removed certain borders, or we've reimagined the borders. We've reimagined architecture. We've reimagined music. We've reimagined so many things. Technology, the type of transport systems we have. We've reimagined the economy. We've reimagined gender roles. We've reimagined how we live. And maybe we become a blueprint for the world. The same way people speak about the education system in Finland. The same way people speak about Singapore. They speak about South Korea. They speak about the dragons in China. At some point, there was the technological push in Japan. We can also be a world leader in how we run, and people want to learn from us. And that can come from a CODESA 2.0. I'd like us to remove the provincial structures. Speaking to so many people, including the premier candidates, I've realized that our provincial structures are an unnecessary bottleneck to effect change. We need to make our local structures stronger. We need to scrap things like deputy ministers. I spoke about that earlier. We need to move to meritocracy sooner rather than later. Yes, we have to fix injustices. Yes, we need to have some type of transformation, but it does not need to represent the demographics of the country. That type of talk is cute. But if America were to represent the demographics of America, the NBA would be majority white with a big chunk of Hispanics. But they have a largely black NBA because those are the most talented people. Yes, of course, in America, there is fair opportunity. That's why the most talented people get to be there. So in South Africa, we need to fix that as well so that the people who are the most capable have fair access to opportunity. But it does not have to be equality in outcome. We can have our economy run by Indians. We can have our sports being run by coloreds. We can have politics run by white people. We can have our education system dominated by black people. We can have global economic transformation being led by black people because they are the most capable. But that requires opportunities to be equal and access to resources and we move to the most talented, most capable people running this country in their various formats. Resolving the land issue I spoke about, true economic transformation, skills-based education, a proper energy mix as we move into the future, and different governance structures. That's going to be my closing point. We need to open our mind beyond government and politics. The Vatican City is run by a church, the Roman Catholic Church. Very tiny country. It might be the smallest country in the world. It's got its own currency. It is run by the church. In certain parts of the world, like Eswatini, it is run by a king or a monarch. The United Kingdom is run by a monarch. So there are places that are run by kings and queens. Even in South Africa, certain parts of the country, arguably, even though they've become figureheads. And we need to speak about the relevance of those people and if we still need them moving forward. We could be run by civil organizations. Imagine if Gift of the Givers was given a province to run the way that they operate. Imagine if other organizations, civil organizations that people fund, that people volunteer for, get to run certain towns and cities. And we're like, no, here we don't vote. Here people choose where they spend their money. And wherever they spend their money, whether it's a civil organization, whether it's a church, whether it's a business, that businessman, may he rest in peace, Raymond Ackerman, in this area, he gets to run the town because he's the wealthiest person here. It's not that Raymond Ackerman is the wealthiest person here, or Christo Visa, or Yanni Mouton, or Patrice Motsipe, or whoever. It's not that they are the richest and then they get to fund the politicians. No, they get to run the town. This is ShopRite City. Everyone here is run because of ShopRite and Christo Visa. Brian Joffy, the guys that would run Bidvest, it's run by this place. And if you're not happy, you stop buying from them and you buy from the next person. So we need to reimagine governance structures. Certain places could be run by schools. If the school leadership is that brilliant, you've got Grey College in Bloemfontein, the best school on the African continent, and the number one rugby school in the world. What can they teach us in governance and how they operate their school? What does their school governing body look like? How do they develop their young men into becoming world leaders? How do they manage their budgets so that they're not the most expensive school in the country? How can we learn from them as a governance structure? How do we learn from AfriForum? 350,000 paying members. They raise over 45 million rand a month. They've been able to hold government to account. They've worked with Solidarity and they've built a skills institution called Soltech. How can there's a governance structure be given a chance to run certain parts of society? And people are not voting for them. People are willingly donating and saying, please do the work. And if you no longer do the work, we will no longer fund you. Imagine if government could only get tax money through donation. To say we will donate to this political party to do this work. And if they're not doing it anymore, we will donate to someone else. In South Africa, we pay forced tax. And then many of us, middle and upper class, we pay additional taxes. Education in this country per the constitution is meant to be free. So anyone who is paying a rand or more in school fees is paying an additional tax. Healthcare, according to our constitution, is meant to be free. So anyone with a medical aid, anyone that uses private healthcare is paying an additional tax. Toll gates are an additional tax. We already have a budget to maintain roads. Why more money to maintain roads, especially that's going to private companies that maintain those roads? There are so many additional taxes we pay. Fuel tax. On top of paying normal tax, you also pay a fuel levy, which if you look at all the taxes combined might be 70% of the fuel that we pay. So we should be allowed to vote. I will not pay an additional tax because I don't smoke, I don't drink, therefore I don't pay extra tax. If I don't have a car outside of public transport, I don't pay the extra tax of fuel. Maybe I get a bicycle. Maybe I get an e-scooter. If we reimagine education, where we've got schools that are self-sustaining and the children sell and produce their own things that make money, all of a sudden I don't have to pay school fees. And so on and so forth. We need to reimagine. I think I'll close it there, man. Shout out to the team at the Penuel Show. I need to give a shout out to the guys at Amped and Dope Conversations in the Penuel channel. I want to give a big thank you to every single politician I've sat with. I want to send a big thank you to all the political analysts that I've sat with, people that are not political analysts that I've sat with and shared some of their thoughts. Various members of society that have contributed. The various polls I've run on Twitter where we've gotten up to like 10,000 votes per poll. Who should be president? Which party are you voting for? What do you think of these issues? All the players that are involved in various ways. All the people on TikTok that analyze. People like Ozetu Kola, on TikTok. People on Instagram. People like Zimasa Vabaza, Mustafa, and the work that they've done. People that I've traveled the world with. My Minister of Nuclear, even though she's not officially, Princess Mtombeni. People that I've sat with, Rob Hersoff, who has allowed me to get into certain spaces that I'd never be able to get into. And his views on politics and allowing me to share my thoughts with him and allowing me to influenced some of his thoughts on politics. Some of the wealthy people I've sat with, black, white, Indian, even before now, the people that contribute to our work, the people that watch the work we do, the people that share our work, and the people that comment. We appreciate you and we'll keep doing this work. Again, this is not a political platform. We're going to be going back, luckily, back to our regular programming after the elections. But because it's election year, we did this for you guys and we hope that you appreciate it. And we hope that some of the other platforms are going to carry on doing the work that they will be doing. And we're going to carry on doing some of the work that we'll be doing in shifting the world to become a better place. Chilling here with Sizwe Dube, and we just want to say thank you very much for joining the special elections, this election special. Khomotso was going to shout at me. Khomotso asked me to give a special shout out to everyone who's not going to be voting. I forgot to mention those people. I used to judge them. If you're choosing not to vote, you are able to vote, but you intentionally choose not to because you do not believe in this political system. You have every right to. Don't let people lie to you and tell you that if you don't vote, you're voting for the ANC. If you don't vote, your vote automatically goes to the majority. No. Our constitution doesn't force people to vote. It would be cool, of course. It would be cool for people to qualify for voting, something that I've spoken about before. But you're choosing not to vote. That is your prerogative. And that is fine. So to you guys, please make sure that you are involved in pushing for change in this country, even if you're not voting. Tell me, Pen, I'm not voting, but this is what I'm doing. I pay tax. I fund non-profit organizations. I volunteer. I teach. I raise my voice. I petition for green papers. I make my voice heard. I'm on social media, but I'm not voting. And it's like, at least you're involved. So to you guys, thank you very much. Shut it down. Sis, I didn't forget anything?
No, we've got everything in.
Happiness. Almost 2 hours of me chatting. Insane.
That means you can really go longer then.
Insane. Penuel the black pen. Done.
Shout outs. Let's call Q for a picture.